Since 1881, Iittala has been a pioneering force in artistic and artisanal glassmaking, and it's a legacy the Finnish heritage brand is continuing under the creative direction of Jani Vepsäläinen, a direction we'll hear more about in a special episode of Monocle on Design. Airing on Wednesday the 18th of September, the special broadcast, recorded in Helsinki, will unpack the brand's workmanship and look at how it bridges the gap between its history and today. So tune in for some essential discussion on craft, culture and creativity. Monocle on Design, brought to you by Iittala.
This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, a report from Habitare, Finland's furniture, interiors and design event, and highlights from London Fashion Week and the showcases of SS Daily, JW Anderson and Derek. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Welcome to today's show. I'm joined in the studio by two of my favourites, Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, and associate editor, Grace Charlton. Welcome.
Hi, that's so nice.
Yeah, we're like a little tripod sitting together in the office, so it's nice to bring that into the studio, which is, quite delightful. But I feel like I've barely seen both of you, either of you, but where have you been?
We've been running around London, and it's a big city, so it does take a long time to get between shows, hence not coming back to the office in between on Friday. So that's why you didn't see me.
That's fair enough. If you need to clock off early and you need to use a fashion show as an excuse, perfectly okay.
Yeah,
Natalie,
I've been doing a little bit of the same, going around town. I've picked a few of my favorites during this London Fashion Week and focused on those. But I think Grace has really gone all around town, seeing anything and everything. So she'll have some great insights to give us, and fresh eyes, because as she pointed out a little bit earlier, she's much younger than both of us, right?
That felt really unnecessary. There was talk of a generational difference, but that's fine. We don't need to unpack that here and now. It just might mean
that's
I might not get
show.
Some of these TikTok references that get thrown out there. Where are we going to go first? So who wants to take us to one of these shows? I think it's important that even though these shows have taken place, but it's going to have an influence on the fashion industry at large. Our own tastes are going to be influenced by this, or what we might be drawn to over the coming years in reality. Natalie, do you want to kick us off?
I can start with my first show that I saw on Friday, which was SS Daily by the designer Stephen Stokey Daly. He's a menswear designer, but he presented his first women's wear collection at the Royal Academy of Arts. And I thought it was such an incredible debut. He sort of translated what he does really well in menswear to women's beautifully. I love what he does in the sense that there's a lot of British references, tailoring, but also a lot of British humor. So you saw very strict, perfectly executed suiting, but also a dress with a Dalmatian on it, and really fun sort of jacquard neat sweaters. And I thought it's a stellar debut. And he's also really smart. He got one of his famous clients, Harry Styles, to invest.
Ask you, did you see him?
I did see him come in. He wore a nice navy suit by SS Daily Men's. There is a big conversation happening that British brands are independent and struggling to stay afloat, and rather than going the traditional route, getting someone who loves your brand, who understands it and wears it, to invest in it and also give you publicity is a really smart route, and I think he'll keep expanding and we'll be seeing more of him.
Is there something to be said as well? I'm assuming you're seeing, all sorts of influencers out at these shows. To have somebody that's a bona fide star at something like this, how significant is that?
In London, it's not as common. Just because these brands are smaller, they don't have budgets to pay the celebrities to come more. But what's interesting is that when you do see these people, it shows you that they genuinely want to be there. They're not paid to be there. So it's a lot more genuine, and they wear the clothes their own way. It's a nicer way, I think, for brands to interact with celebrities. So Harry Styles was there because he's invested in the brand. He likes it. I always see interesting people at the JW Anderson shows, which was another of my highlights. It's interesting to see which of these personalities go to the shows out of their own goodwill.
If we're talking about their role in the fashion industry, do we then need to see them wearing these clothes in a year's time or whenever they're off the runways? Is that also part of this ecosystem?
Yes, I think it influences us whether we like it or not when you see public figures wearing the clothes, some more than others. I'd like to think that I have my own taste and I don't look at celebrities, but that's illusion, isn't it?
Lots of this looks like it can go straight from the runway into our wardrobes. Is London a little bit more direct in terms of like its ability to be immediately translated into everyday life, or is there an element of play and adventure too?
I'd say not at all, actually. A lot of the shows you see, they're so creative and over the top, and that's why I love London Fashion Week, but it is quite rare to see a show and be like, oh, obviously straight to the racks. I saw like Bora Axu and Yuhan Wang, and I've always loved what they do, but I mean, it's not at all my style, and it's always very like world building, lots of layers, lots of colours, lots of layers. But one of my highlights actually was Derek, which is a new brand that was started by this Central St Martin's grad called Luke Derek, and he is very influenced by East London. His debut last year was called Night Walking, and it was so cool. And this was his summer collection, but it was called Rain Check, which was so funny because we've had the most awful summer in London, and I actually think a lot of the shows I saw reflected this because they all had like trench coats and jumpers at some stage. Derek's show was like a lot of like functional nylon, lots of waterproof fabrics, cotton t-shirts but with a scarf in case it gets cold. He trained on Savile Row and with like Brioni and Dunhill, so he's got that tailoring background, but it is just very like modern and cool and fresh. And you'll know this because I know you're on TikTok, Nick, but being British is quite cool at the moment. There's this trend called Brit Maxing, and I think it's with the Oasis reunion. Suddenly being in London is a little bit cooler, and I thought I could sense this in the mood of Fashion Week and like people being excited for Charlie XCX performing. But Natalie, you said you weren't so sure.
Yeah, I can see what you mean, and it's interesting that this idea of Britishness is becoming a lot cooler again, and even other brands like Celine, which is a French house, referencing it really heavily in their latest menswear collection. So there is a moment definitely happening. I do agree with you. And there was kind of a celebratory atmosphere given that it is 40 years of Fashion Week. What I thought, and the conversations that I was having that weren't as jolly, let's say, was that the schedule is much thinner than it used to be. A lot of the designers cannot afford to host shows like they used to. A lot of them had to just stop operating completely, including my absolute favorite and Nick's wife's favorite, Christopher Kane, and shout out to Hannah.
She'll definitely be listening to this. I'm curious then, so what's the solution? I cover more furniture, architecture. Every now and again you let me do a little bit on fashion, but it seems to be more about the manufacturing, less about the style. I won't take that personally. Solutions people have found in Milan at Milan Design Week is doing little pop-up shows in the street or taking over a car bay and presenting their work there. Are there workarounds? Are there ways for brands to still get their work out there during Fashion Week without breaking the bank?
Fashion designers should be looking at other industries, especially adjacent industries like design, and hosting a fashion show the traditional way is extremely expensive, especially when you're an independent brand. And maybe there is a way of looking at alternatives, like whether it's a pop-up shop or something on the street, and get creative. And instead of trying to compete with Paris and Milan, which do fashion shows at such large scale, it is about London finding a different way of bringing people together. And I think the community needs to be much stronger in terms of helping these brands and supporting them, not just on the creative side, but also build more viable businesses, finding the right investors, working with retailers the right way, and getting mentorship financially as well.
What happens if these shows don't take place? What's the impact on a brand if they don't show something during Fashion Week?
You lose relevance, I guess, even though now there are so many other ways you can host events at other times of the year. You can travel to meet your clients. You can kind of release a campaign online. And this is why some of the brands weigh the pros and cons, and they say, actually, rather than doing this during Fashion Week, I would rather do something else or go to Paris and meet the buyers there. There's all these other alternatives, and you can still run your business. But the city and that community and London Fashion Week loses out.
Have you felt that community this week, Grace? Have you felt like part of something bigger?
Yeah, I think I do. And I've been going to these shows now for like a couple of years. I'm still quite new to it, but you start to meet people, and it's nice to see brands like Derek 2 seasons in a row, or like Boraxi. I think I've seen every show he's done in the past 2 years. There is a little bit of community, is true. I think maybe it's being British and like really self-deprecating. But look at New York, like they were getting lots of criticism, and now this season it looks like they've done really well. They've had Alaya bring a lot of attention to it. I still hope for it. I think there's a lot of nostalgia for London in the 90s and the Gallianos and the Lee McQueen and all of that. What they did was what I hoped might happen in London, which is sort of bring back a little bit of creativity and independence to the fashion week.
And it exists in a very small scale. I think what's interesting, and you don't see it anywhere else in any other cities, that you get these really niche groups of brand loyalists that dress head to toe. I mean, I went to the Simone Rocha show, which was at the Old Bailey, incredible venue, and you would see these girls in their tulle dresses with the Crocs that are bejeweled, the bags, the pearls, the earrings. The morning before at the J.W. Anderson show, you had a different crowd of people that were dressed in those surrealist color block creation that Jonathan Anderson does so well. So you really have loyalists and people that go all out and they dress up and they embrace it. So it's just about bringing a little bit more attention to these brands and celebrating that London is niche and creative and a little bit eccentric.
I want to talk about another young British designer. Grace, you went and saw Ahluwalia, who was one of my favourites.
Priya Ahluwalia, who's this British but also Nigerian and Indian designer. The collection was very like 70s orange, brown palette, very like sunset vibes. The music was really cool. There was so much warmth in this show, and the occasional trench coat, and also a fuzzy mohair jumper, which was like beaded with Pandora beads. What I love about London Fashion Week is I never go to Westminster. Like, I'm not in that area at all. And this was just behind Westminster Abbey, and it was really fun to try and find the venue with Kyoko. We were running around and following people who were dressed in head-to-toe Ahluwalia.
Kyoko's our fashion stylist. I mean,
yeah.
What was her take on the show? I know you're having a little bit of back and forth over the course of these few days.
I think she said it was a little bit too busy for her, but she's a true minimalist, and that's her.
Maybe that again is the beauty of these shows. Of all the shows we've talked about, I've got images in front of me, and they are all so distinct and so different. Maybe the only crossover I'm seeing is Simone Rocha and SS Daily both have some transparent fabrics used, but outside of that, they all feel very distinct. But
it's part of the beauty of London. Everyone does their own thing, and it felt even more pertinent this season. The people that are making it through in this really hard competitive market, I had a feeling that they just wanted to have fun, to go all out. Times are hard. We might as well just enjoy it. And especially at Simone Rocha, it felt like that. You just had punk references. There was a lot of transparencies, silk bra with a ball gown. Nothing really made sense. But when you saw it all together, it was beautiful and romantic. She called it a sweet satire, which I loved, and she always leaves a poem for you on your chair.
A nice little takeaway. I mean, maybe wrapping up some final thoughts. I'll go first. The mix of shows and the mix of what's on show celebrates London's diversity, and maybe that's the strength that we need to be tapping into. I think sometimes I'm looking at images from other fashion shows around the world, and they're all kind of beige or a very particular colourway or style. I think the diversity here is what sets London apart as a place to live, but it's also translated to these shows.
I agree. I think what's beautiful about London is not polished and Chanel and Prada and like the sort of really the creme de la creme. It's a bit more scrappy, and we should be proud of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We need to support these brands, show up, shop them, and hopefully to ensure that the city keeps going and the Fashion Week keeps going the next 40 years. I hope that in the mix of these younger designers, maybe we can get some of the bigger names, whether it's Alexander McQueen or Stella McCartney, to come back. And once you have that blend of old and young, established and independent, the city could really take off again. And it cycles, so it will come back.
Beautiful. Natalie Theodosi, Grace Charlton, thanks for joining us on Monocle on Design. After the break, I'll be in Helsinki at the trade fair Habitare.
What can you learn in a minute? More than you think if you subscribe to Monocle's daily email newsletter. The Monocle Minute provides fresh analysis of breaking news and direct-to-your-inbox insights on everything from global affairs to entrepreneurship. On Saturdays with the weekend edition, we'll widen your horizons with wry observation, drinking and dining recommendations, and must-know openings. Subscribe now at monocle.com/minute.
Thanks to Nick in London. This is Nick in Helsinki at Habitare. I'm here with our Helsinki correspondent, Petri Burtsoff. This is my first time here. It's an amazing, amazing trade fair. Tell us a little bit about its importance to, I guess, the Finnish design scene, Petri.
It is the biggest event in Finland by far. I think what sets Habitare apart, but it's very much a consumer-oriented fair. So some of the big brands, they launch in Milan, they might launch in Paris, Copenhagen, but a lot of the brands actually launch here at Habitare. And they sell to consumers. People come here to get a new sofa, get a new chair, get a new table for their home. So it means a lot. And I mean, it's a big fair. I think pre-COVID, they had close to 100,000 visitors. I don't know what the numbers are now, but I remember last year it was quite full. So we're not talking about some small scale, industry event. In fact, B2B is quite a small part of this fair. I saw on their website that they have over 500 exhibitors. Most of them are Finnish brands that make furniture for Finnish homes. So, 500 is a lot. We're a country of 5 million people. Every year I come here, I discover something new. And that's, of course, the greatest thing about being present face-to-face at trade fairs instead of just browsing Instagram.
What's really positive about this fair is it's not necessarily dwelling on the past and resting on the laurels, but instead, I guess, pushing Finnish design forward. We've got a little bit of context of the trade fair there and what's happening here at Habitare, but maybe let's dive into some more specific case studies or examples of brands, people that you've spoken to.
I started off with talking to Johanna Vuori from Nikari and Woodnotes about their relatively young brand, but they have a lot of international exposure. They're at all the big trade fairs, and so I spoke to Johanna about not only about what they're launching at Habitare, but also what the fair means to them, given that they're present at all the big fairs as well. So just I asked her to put Habitare into context.
Well, this year we wanted to celebrate our lovely local fair, so we are publishing a new extendable version of our beloved basic table by Jenni Roininen, our creative director at Nikari. So we show here the oval version of the basic table. It's really nice, the mechanism underneath, and then the straight table as well. And then at Woodnote side, we have a special classic designed by Harri Koskinen already 20 years ago. It's called K-Chair, and we've sold so many K-Chairs during these 20 years that we wanted to bring out something very special, something that shows how it looks like today. So we have brought out 3 different monochrome versions that got its inspiration from the city environment around us. So there is a park, which is obviously the green version, and then concrete, which is the grey concrete looking version. And then we have the third one, which is tile, or brick, I'd say brick, a nice reddish brown version, very comfortable to sit.
So Johanna, maybe just put Habitare into context for our international listeners. You're at Salone, you're at the Maison et Objet, How is Habitare different?
I actually had really interesting conversations last year during the big fairs. And there were people who are really design enthusiasts, and they said that they would love to see something very local, something a bit different, something that shows different things than the big fairs. So I'd say Habitare is one of the best ones there. You come here, it's easy. It doesn't take so long to go around, but all the stands or the booths, the products, they are very Finnish, well done. It might be very inspiring to see, I'd say.
How big is the domestic market for you, obviously being a Finnish brand, but with a lot of international customers as well?
It's less than half, but it is important to us. We feel ourselves very Finnish. We know that we come from a vast country, but with not so many inhabitants, so we are proud to present our perspective also globally.
That was Johanna Vuori from Nikari and Woodnotes. Now, Nikari's a relatively young brands, but there's also plenty of heritage brands here too as well, Petri, obviously. You spoke to some of them. Who are we going to hear from now?
So next we're going to hear from Ida Kukkapuro, who is the granddaughter of Yrjö Kukkapuro, a legendary Finnish designer from the 60s, 70s, 80s with a massive back catalog. And the brand is actually relaunching a chair from, I believe it was from the 1970s, together with the Swedish company Hem. I asked Ida about the importance of being here at Habitare. They're also at Habitare for the first time in many, many years, and sort of the importance of the back catalog for the company and the importance of looking after such a rich heritage. And so this is what Ida had to say.
As we speak, we are having a preview of them by the Swedish company called Hem. And it's a chair that was designed in 1981, so just before the postmodernism hit the design scene. And they were first introduced in 82 in Milano in the Salone Demobile. And they haven't been in production in decades, and now the Swedish company they were surprised that they got to relaunch them and introduce them back to the market. We are super happy to have this Finnish-Swedish collaboration going on.
So maybe talk to us also about your amazing legacy and sort of how often you relaunch these classic heritage models.
There used to be only few companies who Yrjö was collaborating with from the 50s until the early 2000s. And then things happened and there was kind of a gap decade. And now we've been working with my mother, Iisa Kukkapuro, finding sort of the relevant models for today and finding the right companies to collaborate with, both in Finland and internationally, and kind of finding new homes for models that actually suit contemporary interiors, public spaces, homes. And it's been a super interesting journey, and we are still in the very beginning because the back catalogue is long, I can tell you.
That was Ida Kukkapuro from Studio Kukkapuro.
I mean, and I guess continuing the heritage thread, and we sort of touched on this at the top, but Finland is home to all these amazing brands, and I think there can sometimes be a difficulty of getting stuck in the past and really maybe resting on your laurels a little bit. So it's kind of nice to see a brand like Hakkala, who I know we're going to hear from their team next, but it's nice to see somebody pushing it forward. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to speak to them.
So Hakkala is a super interesting company because they're a heritage company and they're still a made in Finland company, a company that was very successful sort of early on in the 60s and the 70s, then saw some quite difficult years, came really close to being shut down, and then have a new creative director who's the granddaughter of the founder. So I spoke to Anna-Leena about the company's heritage, but also about what they decided to launch here at Habitare, and this is what Anna-Leena Hakkala had to say.
Yeah, this is actually the most important week for us whole year. It's important because we are launching our new products. We launched a puzzle sofa. It's a modular sofa. It consists of basic forms. You can do your own puzzle.
As the name suggests, you can make it into a big 3-seater, but you can have an L shape and everything. I saw it in this wonderful happy green color, and I think that's your thing. You're known for having these inspiring colors when most of Finnish design is still very sort of understated colors and just sort of natural wood and all of that, and then you bring this element of happiness just to your showroom and everything that you have. I want to know more about where does that come from? It's so, in a way, unexpected, unusual in this country.
Yeah, I think because Finnish design is often it's not so happy.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, and we want to make change for that. We want to show that Finnish design can be also very brave, bold, happy, colorful. We want to bring people joy, and that's our thing.
That was Anna-Leena Hakkala there. Now, so far, our real focus of this discussion has been on Finnish brands, Petri, but there's been a little bit of a shift as well for, Habitare established in 1970s, very, very much focused on the domestic market, but in recent years there's sort of been a push to be a little bit more international, I guess, both in terms of getting international designers, developers, architects to come here and see the work on show, but also international brands, and, there's been quite a significant shift, particularly this year, with some amazing Nordic brands showing for the first time. Carl Hansen and Son being the prime candidate. You went and spoke to them, their CEO, Knud-Erik Hansen. Tell me a little bit about the significance of this event for them, but also perhaps for the Finnish design scene to have a huge Nordic brand showing here as well.
As you said, one of the biggest furniture brands from the Nordics, and Habitare has been around for a long time. They didn't think it was key for them to be here. Now they do believe it. They have a big flagship store in Helsinki as well. Finland's still a relatively small market, so I wanted to ask Knud-Erik why they focus so heavily on Finland and sort of how that plays as part of their bigger sort of global strategy. So this is what Knud-Erik Hansen had to say.
Well, you can always say Finland is a little bit out of the main area where we do business, but it's an interesting development here. Now Finland is taking more part of Europe and turning that way, and we thought it would be time that we also start looking a little bit at Finland here. And therefore we opened a flagship store here a couple of years ago. We now go to the exhibition, and we see also, of course, the Finnish people here love a good design. I find the atmosphere here very nice, and the people are positive, and they are interested. And of course, for us, it's interesting because we are in the beginning startup, and this kind of consciousness about what we are doing is quite interesting. The exhibition here in Helsinki will be much bigger. It will be growing, and there will be interest also from other areas. When we get a bit more peaceful living in Europe, this has a great potential.
That was Knud-Erik Hansen. Now we've moved beyond Finland as a country, but we're now going to move beyond Habitare as a trade hall. We're going to head into Helsinki for Helsinki Design Week.
Yeah, I spoke with Helsinki Design Week's program director, Anni Korkman, about what goes on during the Design Week and what her favorite bits about it were.
Well, we've arranged several talks. There's been an extensive discussion program taking place at our main venue. It's an old banking hall in Hakaniemi, which is an interesting developing area in Helsinki. And together with Marimekko, we created Bar Unikko, or Bar Unico, as you would say. Maybe some people might remember the project from Milan. But this year we made a Helsinki version, obviously. We didn't recreate something in Milan. Every day in the main venue, we've had different talks. On Wednesday, we discuss fashion, but from the perspective of materials and how does that affect on both the end, like the consumer, but also the designer and the whole industry. And there was some really I'd like to say vulnerable perspectives, and designers that were kind enough to accept our invitation to join the talks were really sharing the mood and the feelings in the midst of it all, and there's obviously some amazing research taking place, for example, in Aalto University in the Comats section. And then on Thursday we collaborated with our friends at the new Architecture and Design Museum and discussed some new perspectives on the museum of the future. And my personal highlight of the talks must have been having Paola Antonelli as our keynote speaker. I'm obviously, as we all are, a huge fan of hers and some of the ideas and point of views that she shared. They'll stay with me for a long time for sure.
That was Anni Korkman, Helsinki Design Week's program director.
Now, Petri, we're wrapping up here. This is your hometown as a Helsinki local. Why should somebody come here for Helsinki Design Week in Habitare?
Well, I mean, obviously Finland as a country has a very rich design heritage. Everybody knows, brands Iittala, Arabia, Marimekko, Alvar Aalto, Aino Aalto, all of that. But people don't necessarily know of all the great emerging brands.
I mean, you've sold it to me. I'm already here, so maybe that didn't need to happen. But, certainly for me as somebody coming here, it's really inspiring. It's really uplifting. It's a perfectly scaled event, and you get to enjoy some great Finnish hospitality. On that note, should we head to the sauna?
Let's head to the sauna and swimming in the cold sea. Let's go.
Perfect. From Habitare.
Peter Birdsov, Monocle's Helsinki correspondent, throwing back to Nick in London.
And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.